one from me and my kitty. It's the end of the month again, which means I've done an immense amount of reading and am now going to present it all to you in a lovely format. Kind of lovely, I don't know. Most of these books I don't have, so I'm gonna have to put a picture right here. I think actually all of them I don't have, because I took them out from the library or I listened to an audiobook of them. So yeah, but that's about it. But before we get into it, put a comment down below on what the last book you read is, or a video idea. It literally takes like 10 seconds and it makes my day when you guys comment. So throw one down below. Also give this video a like and subscribers. But yeah, without much further ado, let's get into it.
This is a quick editing Ashley note. If I look down at any point, it's because I'm looking at my Goodreads on my laptop, and that will be in the description if you want to come follow me.
Okay, so the first book I read this month was From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty. I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. So this, I kind of expected it to be like, you know, how like different religions view death and like a more academic look, or maybe even like the most sensationalistic death rituals from around the world, but it was not that. It was like very warm and personal and like nice, and it was also like thoughtful but also like honest. It was a collection of different places that the author has gone because she's a mortician, I believe, and she's like looked at death practices from around the world. So these are like both research based and like actual field experience based, which I thought was really, really cool. And it incorporates both like ancient traditions as well as like new like modern ways of dealing with the dead, because like, I don't know, there's not a lot of room to bury people. I would recommend this book literally to anyone, even if you don't normally read nonfiction, because it doesn't read like a nonfiction, and those are my favorite kinds. I mean, obviously I love to like learn and make my brain feel bigger, but I also really love nonfictions that don't feel like nonfiction. The next book I read this month is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I read this book expecting it to be a lot scarier than it was, but also it's like marketed as a children's book, so maybe it just wasn't scary to me particularly. But I do love Neil Gaiman's writing style. Obviously, I love Good Omens so much, and I definitely need to read more by him. The thing I would say is, if you've seen the movie, it's very hard not to compare the movie and the book because they're not actually that similar. Like, obviously the big storyline is similar, but there's a lot of key differences. Also, mainly that there's no YB. YB is my favorite character from the movie, and he was not in the book, which is probably why it was 4 stars. But it's good. Yeah. Next on the books I read is Isn't It Romantic by Lisa K. Adams. I did not know that this was part of a series, but it literally worked perfectly fine. Like, all the context you needed to know from the past books was like set in the book, so it was fine to read as a standalone. Not gonna lie, I was not hooked on this from the beginning. Oh, I forgot to say 4 stars out of 5 stars. I was not hooked on it by the beginning because it was literally just talking about how he's allergic to gluten and he poops himself all the time. I was like, oh, okay, intriguing, but he can eat cheese, which is something I can't do, so like, cool. But I picked it from the vibe of the cover, and it did live up to it, because this man, he reads, he writes, he loves animals, he loves his friends. He's not just like a normal huggy bro, okay? Wasn't quite as spicy as I was looking for. And also, the real reason I gave it like 4 stars out of 5 stars is because there was a really compelling plot with a female character where she was like a journalist and she's poking into this like crime, but not enough time was spent on that part. I love mysteries. I love Tana French. I read some Agatha Christie last winter and I liked it, but I really wanted focus on that murder, and there really wasn't any, which was very upsetting. I mean, it did wrap up and it was satisfying, but like, not cool enough. The next book I read was technically a play. It is Doubt by John Patrick Shanley. Now, I had to read this one for my theater class because I was doing a scene from this. I play Sister Aloysius in the scene. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I love a little like period piece. It is set in the 60s, so there's like themes of racism and like homophobia in there, which is like yike, but also like important to talk about. I do like how succinct the play was. I think I read it in like an hour or 2 hours, but I don't like the ending. So if you want a satisfying ending and you want to read a play, this is not it, but I would if this to most people whether or not you like theater. Next we have The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars. I do not remember if it was last year or the year before that I read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. So when I found out that he had like another Halloween book, I was like, oh, we have to read this. But I really like his like writing style in this. It's really nice and compelling, and also this took me like an hour, maybe 2 hours to read, so it's a very quick, short read. It's just like it's pretty well paced, pretty fast paced. They like travel through time and learn about Halloween, which I just think was really fun, and it got me in the mood for spooky season. So yeah. The next book, or I guess books, or I guess comic graphic novel that I read was Heartstopper. Compared to the show, you couldn't get in as much detail because it's like a comic, it takes a lot of effort to draw and stuff, but I really like how it dealt with like both lighthearted and deep topics very like respectfully and like with care and stuff. Some of the minor characters I would have loved to see more of, like Tara and Darcy, but like that's what the show is for. I love the art style, it was beautiful. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I think I gave this 4.75 stars just because like, again, not enough focus on my girls, but also Tao is so much more understandable in the books than he is in the show. I hated Tao from the show, but like he's fine in the books. The next book I read is Girl Interrupted. I did not know that there was like a book form of this. I love the movie with Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie, so I guess this is sort of in the category of autobiography, but I just love the way that Susanna Kaysen writes. It's almost like ethereal in a way, and it's like the misbehaved woman sort of trope, I guess, but I wouldn't call it a trope since it's real life. But I really like how it's a look at like how things actually were, like, again, this is in the 60s, I believe, how like mental institutions were, because it wasn't like as cruel as sometimes they're painted in media, but also it wasn't good either. So like, I don't know, I really think that it made me think about like what's really the difference between like normal and I guess more like neurotypical and neurodivergent people, because I feel like the line is just like, it's not really in a set place. It moves depending on who you ask and depending on the time and depending on, you know, who's the person in question that we're asking, like, are they sane or are they not? And it made me think, but it was also just written so beautifully that it was so easy to read. I would recommend this to anyone. 5 out of 5 stars. The next book is Hooked by Emily McIntyre. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. So remember in the past when I said that I was looking for a spicy book and I couldn't find a spicy enough book? Well, this is the spicy enough book. I want to say like, give me more, I can take it, but at the same time like, that's good. It's 4 out of 5 stars because the beginning was so gross. It was good. We like this. We love Wendy and James' relationship. I don't really get the point of this being like a twisted Peter Pan, because the only thing that was relevant to Peter Pan was the fact that like he had a hook knife, and he had a boat, but like everything else was just like the names. Like the plane company is Neverland. It's dumb and I hate it so much. Literally just, I think, because she couldn't come up with names. It has nothing to do with Peter Pan. And it literally says in the beginning of the book, like, oh, this is not a retelling. Like, girl, why are you marking it as a retelling then? And I think another reason why I gave it 4 instead of 5 stars is because the plot twists, they weren't predictable, but they also were like, okay, and because they really led to nothing. They were like, plot twist, and the end. I was like, cool, but this is a series, so like, maybe. I would recommend this if you like dark, spicy romance, and if you're okay with reading 50 pages of ick for the rest to be decent. The next book I read was a little more of a classic. This is American Gothic by Robert Bloch. He is the author of Psycho, so like this guy knows his stuff. Basically, this is like a retelling. I don't know what to call it. It's not nonfiction. It's definitely not nonfiction. But I don't think I would call it historical fiction either, because it's like based on real events. So it tells the story of G. Gordon Gray, which for those of you who don't know is just like the H.H. Holmes character who built like this murder castle in Chicago during the World's Fair. I'm also writing a 9-page paper for my English class on this topic, which I will turn into a video essay for this after, you know, I've submitted it and everything and gotten through with the class. But I'm not gonna talk about any of like my personal opinions. I will say is that like some of the details are altered. Like we love, yes, girl power for Crystal, but that wasn't a thing in the book. Also, H.H. Holmes was arrested for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel. He did not die how he died in this book. I was gonna give spoilers, but I'm not going to. But to Robert Bloch's credit, it's a nice book. It's very well written, satisfying ending, compelling characters, etc. I would absolutely recommend this, whether you do or do not know about H.H. Holmes, but I would say definitely like don't take the book too seriously. It is a work of fiction, and if you're interested to hear sort of like what I think is what actually happened, then subscribe and stick around. It'll come out in like January, February or something. I'm gonna put it together in a really nice video essay format. The next book I read, or rather listened to, because I did this as an audiobook, because I think like older texts are like hard for me to focus on. It was hard for me to focus on the audiobook as well, but this is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. First of all, I love an epistolary. Like, I don't love Frankenstein, I never finished Frankenstein, but I do like the epistolary part of it. I loved Wuthering Heights. I think there was probably another book that I've read that was an epistolary, but I just love it. And I think this one was a lot clearer than, like, for example, Wuthering Heights was. It was very clear, like, who was being referred to in the first person and like what characters were being talked at. Maybe it was because I listened to a really good audiobook that was free on Spotify. It was not like an audiobook, it's a podcast, so it's actually conveniently broken into chapters. But it was very clear like who was talking. It sort of gives like the original Mystery Incorporated, like Scooby Gang, the characters in there. I will say, if you have watched Dracula, I haven't watched like the Keanu Reeves one or anything else, but I have watched the Bela Lugosi one, like the 30s one, and I will say that it was very confusing in the beginning listening to this, because the stories of like Renfield and Jonathan Harker are sort of muddled together in the movies, and in the book they're two like very distinct and separate characters. But once I had like figured that out, it was easier. Although if you do read or listen to this, Arthur and Godalming are the same person. This is not a spoiler. I think it was probably mentioned at some point in the book. I think he got like a new title or something, and so he has to go by Lord Godalming. But I literally did not figure out until like chapter 25 that they're the same person. But they are. Quick Google search will tell you that. 4 out of 5 stars. I would recommend this if you like horror, mystery, classics. If you even just like Halloween, I would read this. Listen to it in an audiobook. It might be easier for you to read if you're not a big fan of reading. The last book I read was It Came From the Closet by Joe Valise, but it's a collection of like little essays by different people. I sort of expected this to be like reading sort of like an AP Lit, how you can read a text through like the queer theory lens. That's kind of what I expected it to be, but really it wasn't that. Like it was sort of that, but it was definitely a lot more personal. I expected it to be like academic, like Dracula's gay and this is why, these 3-4 reasons I'm going to tell you in a pages long essay, but really it wasn't like ever trying to claim that these horror movies are LGBT, but just sort of like how they relate to people's personal experiences. And I think it was just beautifully written. Also, the chapter headings have these just beautiful, gorgeous illustrations on them, and I loved like reading the essays and then flipping back to the illustration being like, ooh, that story's from this picture, or this picture's from that story. I think it really increased my engagement with the text, and I really loved that. Whether or not you can or cannot relate to the essays, I think it's just really just well written. Is honestly, if you just like reading, I would read this to expand your horizons. 5 out of 5 stars. I will say, beware spoilers for all the movies discussed. I don't really care about horror movies that much, so I was fine with it, but there are massive spoilers for like some of the biggest horror movies out there. So if you haven't watched them, maybe like skip to the next essay. I've technically already read a book in November, Carmilla. It's like the predecessor to Dracula, but more on that later. I'm also currently reading A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I am like maybe a third of the way through with that. First one is The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. This is about H.H. Holmes. I knew this for my research project. Depraved, the shocking story of America's first serial killer, which is also about H.H. Holmes. It is by Harold Schechter, another one for my research paper. Yeah, I also have another one that I need to read. It's also about H.H. Holmes. It's right there, but that will go on the list. I have Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury because I really like Ray Bradbury. I have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller because I've heard lots of good things about this. And then I have How the Word is Passed, which is a book that I saw probably recommended on like, I don't know, TikTok, by Clint Smith. This is the history of slavery across America. I thought that would be cool nonfiction to read. This is The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. I think this is a mystery if I'm not mistaken. I have mystery books right here. They have this thing out at my college library where basically it has like a little description of the book. I got a fantasy one and a mystery one. But basically you just pick books that you want to check out based on the little tiny blurb. Like, see how small those are? They're little blurbs. So I'm gonna open them right now. Let's start with the mystery one. Okay. This is new. Oh, this is so crisp and new. I think this probably is like a new thing from the library, like a new book that they got in. This is Girl Gone Missing by Marcy R. Rendon. I know nothing about this except it is a college student helps local detectives with the case of a missing girl. So mystery. Oh, also I forgot to mention, I'm gonna read like the next 2 books in this series. Right, but let's open the fantasy one. This is gonna be my final official TBR book for November. The blurb on this one is a dark and imaginative retelling of a classic children's story. Oh, there's a mouse on the back. Oh no, is it a rabbit? Okay, this is Alice by Christina Henry. I have no clue about this book, but it has a quote from the Jabberwocky on the top. It says, "Beware the claws that catch." And then on the back it said, "A mind-bending new novel inspired by the twisted and wondrous works of Lewis Carroll." This is gonna be fun because I'm actually seeing my old high school's production of Alice in Wonderland in like, I think a couple days is when I'm seeing that. This is what it is. That is my official TBR for this month. So yeah, stick around, give it a like, comment what book you read last or video idea, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with who knows what.